Hello, everyone. Welcome to Online Seller UK podcast. My name is Prabhat, founder at Online Seller UK. And today we've got a really interesting topic and really important one for all Amazon sellers. It's to do with Amazon suspensions and intellectual property law. So we'll be talking all the details with David. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Prabhat.
Excellent. So, David, I think it's good for us to, if you introduce yourself and we can take it from there.
Sure. So I'm David Miller. I'm the founding attorney at David Allen Miller Law, PLLC. We represent Amazon sellers along with various types of other e-com sellers, typically third-party sellers, along with private label brands. We assist with account and listing suspensions, intellectual property disputes, and various other types of business law and compliance matters.
Absolutely. So it's a really important part of selling on Amazon itself. So, let's talk about some of the common reasons that account can get suspended.
Sure. So there are so many reasons accounts can get suspended. So I'll talk about certain areas of suspensions that are more common today, and they tend to change over time. Sometimes it's time of year. Sometimes Amazon just happens to be more strict with certain policies. Right now, and in the last several months, I would say the number one suspension issue is drop shipping and seller code of conduct violations. Now, it used to be where they were completely separate, seller code of conduct issues and drop shipping. So when sellers were suspended, Amazon would say, you're drop shipping, you're violating our policy, or you're violating the seller code of conduct. Now, what Amazon has done is combine them both into one notice. So what I've seen in my experience is that almost always means that you've been drop shipping improperly. So that's I would say the number one reason for being suspended right now.
Wow. I know there are a lot of sellers who do drop ship, so it's a really difficult time for them. So, do you want to talk about how to avoid that sort of suspension due to drop shipping?
Sure. So drop shipping on its face is okay on Amazon, but you have to follow the rules. Now, the problem with it is the benefit of drop shipping is you don't have to buy product beforehand, right? Amazon customer makes a purchase from you, you contact your supplier, let's say it's Walmart, for example, they ship the product directly to the Amazon customer. You never touch the product, never have to store any inventory, which sounds great. I understand why so many sellers want to do it because you don't have that initial investment. But Amazon is worried about multiple things, one of which is being the seller of record. If you're an Amazon customer, Amazon's worried that the customer will be confused as to who to return the product to. If it says Walmart on the packaging, they'll just be confused. Do they contact Walmart? Do they contact Amazon? Do they contact the seller? Amazon doesn't want it. They don't want any ties to Walmart in our example. Okay, so that is a big issue. And also, I would say the timing, the shipping issues that come along with drop shipping. Another example is an Amazon customer buys the product and maybe your supplier doesn't have any current inventory. And it happens all the time. You don't have the stock. It's not your warehouse. You don't know what's sitting in inventory. That leads to delays. That leads to Amazon customers being unhappy. So these are a couple of the common reasons, why Amazon is against it. So in order to avoid it, if you want to drop ship, and to be quite frank, it's just not a long-term business model. A lot of drop shippers that are shipping improperly typically get caught at some point. They can do really, really well short term. It's not like it was years ago where sellers were able to do it for a very long period of time. So in my mind, it's more of a short-term gain, not a long-term business model. So honestly, I would just avoid it in general or follow the rules and, make sure to have the inventory on hand so you can still source from Walmart, but just make sure or either hire somebody to make sure all the packaging is correct and that you're the seller of record.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are other reasons that's being suspended, and we depend on a lot of people do depend on Amazon to gain the revenue and also staff and all that sort of thing. So And there are lots of horror stories of account being suspended. I've seen tweets, unfortunately, saying that somebody's nearly doing taking their life attempt on Twitter and things like that, which is it's real because all of a sudden your business is gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's really difficult situations. And even if talking about it, I don't feel it's really difficult to talk about when it is really happening to yourself. So what are the steps that a seller should do when they see that notification that account has been suspended? So if you could highlight some of the steps, that'd be really helpful.
Sure. So as tough as it may be, I think the first step is really to try and calm yourself down and try and understand why it happened. Doesn't always mean it's a death sentence. There are plenty of sellers that are able to get reinstated on their own. And if you struggle, there are tons of service providers, there are attorneys that can help. So that's the first step. Once you're able to kind of gather yourself, review the issue and try and understand why it happened. Figure if for example customers were complaining that maybe the product was inauthentic, try and go to your supplier, see what went wrong. Oftentimes sellers will know right out of the gate what happened, but not always. Sometimes they are completely dumbfounded, they don't understand, they just think Amazon made a mistake, and that's very possible. If you've done a thorough review and that's the case, or even if it's not, the next step is to write what's called a plan of action that has three main components: a root cause, corrective actions, and preventative measures. So the root cause is exactly what it sounds like. What caused the issue? Stay very specific to the issue. Don't talk about your overall account or how you've been a great seller for years and it's never happened to you before. They don't care. Okay, keep emotion out of it. Fortunately, Amazon doesn't care if you have family issues, if you're going through a divorce. Again, Amazon is not going to care about that. Corrective actions, how you have fixed the current issue. So if, for example, maybe you found that a supplier, you had a bad apple, it's very possible. A lot of sellers deal with tons of suppliers. Sometimes, you get it incorrect, or maybe, you did a thorough review, but the supplier messed something up. Tell them you terminated the relationship with them, and how you've resolved that current issue. And the last step, the preventative measures section, is how you're going to ensure that your business is not going to endure this sort of issue again. It's more of the long-term resolution. So in our example with the supplier, we can say that we will do a more thorough job of vetting the supplier and then go into details about how you're going to do that.
Excellent. So it sounds good and then sounds quite straightforward, but you've suggested earlier, talking to attorney might help, but that is something I'd suggest. There's always needs to be a second person that you can talk to, and you must have met a lot of Amazon sellers who they work on their own and all that sort of thing. So having that opinion with somebody else, it's always a good thing to do. So let's move a slightly different angle to suspension, and let's move on to talk about intellectual property law. So is this, it must be very complicated to even think about it. So do you want to put some light on it, what sellers should think about when it comes to intellectual property?
Sure. So first off, there's two different types of what sellers go through Amazon, right? So there's suspected intellectual property and received intellectual property complaints. So I want to discuss the differences very briefly. Essentially, suspected IP infringement is when Amazon is flagging a listing. It's not actually anybody filing any sort of complaint against you. So in the past, these were not as serious, and it was very rare for Amazon sellers to be suspended over it. All you really had to do was change the brand listing. Usually you can edit the listing yourself and then the complaints go away. And even if you didn't do that, most of the time, very high percentage of time, sellers were not suspended. But now I'm seeing a little bit of a shift. I had a seller very recently who was dealing with a suspected IP issue, or several of them actually, and Amazon told him that it's not a big deal, don't worry about it, essentially. And then he got a suspension notification or a warning that his account was going to be suspended. And I believe it has to do with Amazon's new system, with the new rating system that they're doing, which a lot of sellers are still trying to figure out, how to maintain it. So now I would say actually the exact opposite. I would clear up all of those suspected IP complaints and close the listings, change the brand, do whatever you have to get rid of them. Now, received intellectual property, those have always been serious, and that hasn't changed at all. That's when a rights owner files either a trademark, a copyright, a counterfeit, or a patent complaint against you. This is when typically sellers look to get attorneys involved, but even still, I've seen where they'll try and resolve the issue themselves. I would do a couple of things. The first step is, it doesn't mean your account's going to get suspended right away, even if it's just a listing, but you do want to make sure that they're clear, especially in a time, during Q4. But in general, you want to protect your overall account health. So to get it reinstated, you have to reach out to the rights owner and try and resolve it directly with them. But I wouldn't necessarily just go to war because you don't think they should have filed the complaint. Take a look and see if the product if you've sold the product, if it's a very profitable one. Sometimes it's a listing where you haven't even had a sale, or the sales are so minimal, it's not worth the headache. It's not worth risking your entire account. So there are certain things that it's not always necessary to get an attorney involved. Or to get nasty or really go to war, so to speak. But there are other times where maybe it's your number one selling product, where it's super important. And if they file the counterfeit complaint, and let's say it's your own brand, or you bought it directly from the manufacturer and authorized distributor, those are claims that you yourself can have legal claims in response to that because they were false. So in addition to contacting the rights owner and try and resolve it directly with them, there's also the Amazon appeal method, where you can appeal to numerous Amazon teams, explain the situation, and try and get the listings reinstated that way also.
Okay, so there's tons of things you can do on that one. And you mentioned rightly so, if somebody does complain, there may be something around that. So thanks for explaining that to us. I think we've gone towards the end of the podcast, and you've explained about suspension and the IP law. And I think it will be good for us to know if somebody wants to talk to you, where is the best place to find you. I know you've been with us in Hammerfest UK in Brighton in this year, and you're going to be again next year. But it's a long way away. It's October next year. So if somebody do want to see David, please come along to Hammerfest UK in Brighton. You'll see David and talk to him directly. But in the meantime, if you want to share your contact details, best place to find David, over to you.
Sure. So my email is david@damlawfirm.com. And my phone number is 1-516-313-1572. And the website is damlawfirm.com.
Excellent. Thank you, David, for your time today, and all the best. Speak to you soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.